The Numbed Republic. Why Japanese Pharmacists View American Painkiller Culture as Slow Poisoning. Part 1. The Tokyo Pharmacist's Disbelief. Imagine managing a quiet, immaculate pharmacy in the heart of Tokyo's Ginza district. You are a senior pharmacist and Campo herbal medicine consultant. To you, a pharmacy is a sanctuary of biological balance. You believe that when the human body experiences pain, whether a throbbing headache, a dull backache, or a muscle spasm, it is not an annoying design flaw to be instantly erased. Pain is a sacred, evolutionary alarm system. It is your body desperately trying to communicate with your consciousness, saying, "Something is broken. You are working too hard. You need to stop, rest, and heal." You are Kenji Sato, a medical traditionalist who views corporate chemical intervention as a last, dangerous resort. In Kenji's world, medicine is governed by the philosophy of Eastern harmony. If a Japanese citizen walks into his pharmacy with a severe migraine, Kenji doesn't just hand them a bottle of maximum-strength synthetic blockers. He sits them down. He asks about their sleep patterns, their stress levels, and their diet. He might recommend a warm herbal tea, a specific breathing exercise, and a mild, highly regulated non-NSAID compound. The goal is to address the root imbalance, not silence the biological messenger. Now, picture Kenji flying to Los Angeles, California, to visit an international pharmaceutical convention. On his first morning, he steps inside a massive, brightly lit American supermarket chain. He walks down the personal care aisle, looking for basic toiletries. Suddenly, he finds himself standing in front of an entire wall dedicated exclusively to over-the-counter, OTC, pain relief. Kenji is stopped dead in his tracks by a feeling of profound professional horror. Before him lie literal industrial-sized plastic buckets containing 500 extra-strength ibuprofen tablets sold for less than $10. He sees bright, aggressive packaging flashing words like liquid gels, maximum strength, rush relief, accelerated power. He watches an ordinary American mother calmly toss a giant, Costco-sized jar of acetaminophen into her shopping cart next to her cereal boxes, as if she were buying candy. The Japanese pharmacist stood in that fluorescent supermarket aisle, his mind completely paralyzed by the sheer, industrial recklessness of what he was witnessing. He went public on international pharmaceutical forums, publishing a devastating critique of the American relationship with pain that sent shockwaves through public health boards. Kenji wrote, "I have studied pharmacology for 40 years. What I am seeing in the United States is not medicine. It is a mass chemical silencing of the population. You are treating the human body like a machine that you can simply slap duct tape over. You have normalized the daily ingestion of toxic, organ-eroding synthetic compounds to maintain an unnatural pace of life. Why has the world's most scientifically advanced nation chosen to poison its citizens' livers and kidneys in the name of instant comfort?" This devastating critique cuts straight through the superficial convenience of American consumer culture and hits the absolute, bleeding core of our modern lifestyle crisis. It forces us to confront a terrifying reality that we have spent decades trying to dress up as fast-acting relief. How did the American dream allow our daily survival to become dependent on a permanent state of chemical numbness? Part 2. The Global Observation, the Nation of the Chemical Band-Aid. When Kenji's critique went viral across international medical networks, toxicology blogs, and cultural forums, it triggered an avalanche of international commentary. Pharmacists, doctors, and wellness experts from Europe, Asia, and Scandinavia looked at the consumption rates of American OTC drugs, and their collective reaction was a mixture of absolute disbelief, profound confusion, and deep moral concern. To the rest of the world, the American model of pain management is viewed as a bizarre cultural pathology. We like to brag about our freedom, our high-octane work ethic, our resilience, and our ability to push through any obstacle. But the moment a foreign medical professional analyzes the chemical crutches required to sustain that hustle, the illusion completely shatters. They realize that America is a nation running on a deficit of genuine health, held together by a fragile scaffolding of synthetic pills. Let us look at how professionals from Western Europe responded to the debate. In countries like France or Germany, Purchasing basic pain relievers is an intentionally controlled human interaction. A French pharmacist commented, "In Paris, you cannot buy ibuprofen or paracetamol off a supermarket shelf next to the milk. It is strictly behind the counter. The pharmacist is legally required to hand it to you, look at you, and ask why you need it. Why? Because these are not benign candies. They cause gastrointestinal bleeding, acute liver failure, and cardiovascular stress when abused." When we see Americans consuming them by the handful, without a second thought, we feel like we are watching a society driving a car with a check engine light permanently cut out. Then came the commentary from the United Kingdom. A British medical researcher noted, "The American concept of extra strength is an absolute marketing scam that causes massive public harm. An ordinary human body does not need 800 milligrams of ibuprofen to function. By normalizing these hyperinflated corporate dosages, you are actively dulling the natural pain thresholds of your population. You have created an artificial cycle where your citizens require higher and higher chemical intervention just to tolerate the basic aches of a normal human life." But the most cutting critique came from holistic health practitioners in Scandinavia. A Danish wellness consultant wrote, "In Denmark, if you have chronic back pain, your doctor does not tell you to take Advil every 6 hours for the rest of your life. They prescribe physical therapy, ergonomics, stress reduction, and mandated time off work. In America, your solution is a cheap pill so you can march right back onto the factory floor or the office cubicle. You are using chemistry to mask a structural failure of lifestyle. It is a slow, systemic poisoning of your citizens' long-term vitality just to maintain short-term economic productivity." This global consensus is a devastating mirror for the American identity. The international community doesn't look at our fully stocked medicine cabinets as a sign of advanced health. They look at it as a tragic cultural flaw that systematically hollows out the physical resilience of our people, turning our bodies into corporate toxic waste dumps. Part 3. The Deep Dive, the Anatomy of the Chemical Armor. How did the American landscape become so completely hostile to the natural rhythm of the human body? Why are our workplaces and supermarkets designed to promote the mass consumption of organ-eroding pills? Where did this extreme biological alienation come from? The answer is not that Americans are naturally fragile or that they love popping pills. The engineered chemical dependence of the United States is driven by a highly rigid, artificial system known as the hustle culture ultimatum, the economic architecture of the healthcare eviction, and the predatory design of the DDC pharma gaslighting. Let us break down the emotional tragedy of the hustle culture ultimatum. In modern America, the human body is treated not as a living organism, but as a corporate asset that must deliver maximum return on investment. The structural economy offers zero buffer for human vulnerability. If you take a week off to heal a sprained knee or recover from a severe emotional burnout, you risk losing your job, your status, and your economic survival. Because the culture demands constant, unyielding performance, the American worker is forced to enter a toxic pact with chemistry. The pill is the only mechanism that allows them to override their biology. They swallow the painkiller not to cure the injury but to silence the alarm so they can keep typing, keep lifting, and keep driving. The corporate system has successfully outsourced the cost of overwork from the company's labor standards directly onto the internal organs of the worker. This brings us to the second massive driver of this isolation, the healthcare eviction. In America, visiting a primary care physician, getting an MRI, or consulting a physical therapist is an incredibly expensive, bureaucratically exhausting nightmare. Even with insurance, copays and deductibles can easily wipe out a family's weekly budget. Therefore, the average middle-class American faces a structural eviction from actual medical care. When they experience a chronic symptom, they cannot afford the luxury of a comprehensive diagnostic investigation. They resort to the $10 supermarket bucket of pills. The OTC painkiller becomes the poor man's doctor. It is a desperate, defensive survival mechanism used by millions of citizens who are structurally barred from accessing real healing, transforming a systemic economic failure into a daily private chemical routine. The third factor is the predatory manipulation of direct-to-consumer, DDC, pharmaceutical gaslighting. The United States is one of only two nations on Earth that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to the public through television and internet media. For decades, American corporate broadcasters have flooded our brains with highly polished, manipulative narratives. They show an aging grandfather suddenly jumping up to play basketball with his grandson, or a working mother smiling radiantly as she runs a marathon, all thanks to a specific little red pill. The marketing message is incredibly insidious. Pain is your enemy. Pain is an insult to your lifestyle. Do not let your body slow you down. Take control. Take our pill. They have successfully reframed the biological act of resting as a personal moral failure of weakness, gaslighting an entire population into believing that vitality means being permanently disconnected from your own nervous system. Part 4. The culture of the esterified gastrointestinal tragedy. To understand why this broken framework survives without a massive public rebellion, we have to analyze the deep, generational deformation of the American mind. We have raised generations of citizens whose entire perception of health, stamina, and self-awareness is filtered exclusively through a transactional, short-term lens. Americans have developed a profound, unconscious psychological condition where health is defined not by the absence of disease, but by the absence of noticeable symptoms. The average American cannot conceptualize a relationship with their body that involves patience, listening, or slow adaptation. This condition has completely warped our biological awareness, transforming us into a society that views our own physical warning signs not as useful data, but as an adversarial threat to our schedule. Think about how this short-term psychology has altered American health behavior. Because every minor discomfort is immediately met with a chemical counterstrike, Americans have lost their natural biological literacy. They no longer know how to interpret why their head hurts or why their joints are inflamed. They don't realize that their chronic headaches are caused by structural dehydration, artificial screen glare, and massive cortisol spikes from stress. They don't realize their back pain is a cry from a completely misaligned skeletal structure caused by 12 hours of sitting in a poorly designed office chair. By masking the symptom within 30 minutes, the underlying destruction continues completely unchecked under the surface. It is the biological equivalent of painting over mold on a wall and pretending the house is clean. Over decades, this silent destruction manifests as an absolute epidemic of chronic gastrointestinal ulcers, unexpected kidney failure, and elevated blood pressure across the American middle class. We return from our high-stress jobs, pull into our driveways, swallow our nightly dose of anti-inflammatory pills to numb our joints, and wash it down with an antacid to soothe our burning stomach linings, wondering why our society feels increasingly exhausted, inflamed, and physically broken. We have traded the deep, enduring peace of systemic wellness for the hollow, temporary truce of chemical numbness. Part 5. The cognitive dissonance of the extra strength illusion. To maintain this highly profitable system of mass-marketed chemical masks, pharmaceutical lobbies and corporate retail chains have successfully manufactured a massive, manipulative psychological defense mechanism within the American public. They call it the freedom of personal wellness. Every time public health advocates suggest that OTC painkillers should be heavily regulated, removed from supermarket shelves, or capped at safer European dosages, the American public reacts with immediate, defensive hostility. They yell, "You are trying to take away our convenience. I know my own body. I don't have time to go to a doctor just for a headache." America is about speed, efficiency, and the freedom to manage our own pain. This is the ultimate American cognitive dissonance. The public has been completely gaslit into mistaking coerced chemical survival for personal freedom. Let us look at the absolute absurdity of this argument. If you live in an environment where you must ingest high-dose synthetic compounds every single day just to tolerate the parameters of your job and your daily life, that is not freedom. That is a biological chemical tax paid to survive an unlivable lifestyle. True freedom is having a society that allows you to slow down when you are hurt. True freedom is having access to diagnostic healthcare that fixes your spine instead of numbing your brain. The American system offers zero choice. It offers an ultimatum: take the pill and keep running, or stop and collapse financially. The most tragic manifestation of this cognitive dissonance is what pharmacists call the symptom suppression loop. Think about what happens when an ordinary American gets a tension headache. They take 2 extra-strength pills. The headache vanishes for 6 hours. But because the underlying stress, dehydration, and lack of sleep are never addressed, the headache returns the next day. Often amplified by what neurologists call medication overuse headaches, a vicious cycle where the very brain cells altered by the painkiller begin to trigger pain signals as the drug wears off. The consumer climbs right back onto the pharmaceutical carousel, buying bigger jars, seeking stronger formulas, completely blind to the fact that their daily corporate remedy has become the primary driver of their chronic biological distress. They are trapped in a loop of engineered dependence, celebrating their ability to work through the pain, while their internal organs are quietly paying the ultimate price. Part 6. The Pharmacist's Final Verdict. When we look back at the profound professional horror of Kenji Sato, standing in front of a supermarket wall of 500-count pill buckets, watching an entire society buy toxic synthetic compounds with the casual indifference of buying candy, we have to realize that this is not a technical debate about liver enzyme metrics or consumer convenience. This is a moral diagnosis of how a civilization treats the human vessel. The human body is not a corporate machine. It is not an engine that can be driven at maximum RPM indefinitely by simply cutting the wires to the warning lights. It is an intricate, intelligent ecosystem of flesh, bone, and consciousness. If a civilization chooses to monetize the suppression of that ecosystem's voice, if it decides to turn the basic signal of physical exhaustion into a multi-billion-dollar retail commodity, then that civilization is actively consuming its own biological future to feed its economic machine. The modern American OTC painkiller industry is operating exactly how it was engineered to perform by the commercial and corporate logics that captured it. It has successfully turned the avoidance of discomfort into a permanent, mass-marketed consumer routine. It has trained an entire population to accept inflammation as normalcy, to mistake a numbed nervous system for health, and to view the slow poisoning of their organs as the price of admission to the modern workforce. It is time for an absolute, cultural reawakening. It is time for American workers, parents, and families to look past the flashy, aggressive branding of the pharmacy aisle, look past the corporate car commercials and televised drug ads, and demand a complete restructuring of our relationship with our bodies. We must refuse the normalization of the industrial-sized pill bucket. We must demand workplaces that respect the biological necessity of rest and recovery. We must fight for an environment where pain is met with inquiry, empathy, and genuine diagnostic care, not a silent chemical execution. The rest of the world is looking at our over-medicated supermarkets not with envy for our maximum strength options, but with absolute bewilderment and profound tragedy. They see our hyperproductive offices, our empty medicine bottles, and the silent, internal erosion of our people. It is time to break the chains of mechanical numbness. It is time to throw out the pill-first dogmas, listen to the wisdom of our own bodies, and give American citizens back their right to rest, to heal, and to live genuinely healthy and free. Stop silencing the alarm. Fix the home for humanity.